Norman was born in New York in the 1940s. He is a boomer. For someone of average height, his posture emanates casual self-assurance, a performance of self-made success that belies the privilege that elevated him to his position. He lives off inherited wealth and has never had to pay for a roof over his head. Despite his age, his white skin is smooth and unblemished. A meticulous attention to grooming keeps him perennially clean-shaven in public, projecting an image of refinement and cultivated elegance. His white hair, forever swept to the side, exudes timeless sophistication. He never sweats and never exudes body odour. He is attractive but nondescript, well-built but non-challenging. In a crowd, few would give him a second glance. In his workplace, Norman is the model of a good employee. He can be found at work before anyone else arrives and well after everyone else has left. No known official complaint has been filed against his name. Truth be told, he has never really worked hard a day in his life. His path through esteemed institutions like the New York Academy of Medicine, the Cleveland Health Museum, and the Warren Anatomical Museum was lined with the labour of others. He has been involved in several major exhibitions, though to be candid, he never even lifted a finger. For someone who is quiet-spoken, he certainly receives a disproportionate amount of merit. His silence carries weight, as his mere presence sets off a frenzy of productivity amongst his colleagues. Striving to meet his unspoken standards, they toil ceaselessly to conform to the image he projects. Their increasingly weathered faces and aching bodies only serve to expand the social distance between them and the world Norman inhabits. Their relentless efforts are a mere footnote to Norman's career. Norman seems indifferent to the effect he has on others, the position he occupies through privilege and not effort, and the insurmountable legacy he has left for those who will clean up after him. With indifference, he looks on, uncaring for the resources consumed to sustain his existence and for the plight of generations to come. Perhaps we need a trauma-informed ethnography to understand Norman. You see, Norman never knew his mum, and he remembers nothing of his childhood. Unusual for his generation, Norman had two dads. The obstetrician-gynecologist Robert Latu Dickinson, who was born in 1861 and died when Norman was only 8, and the artist Abram Belsky, who was 46 years Robert's junior and who died in 1988, when Norman was in his 40s. Norman was brought up to be fixed in his position, to be a beacon for others, and to stand for the betterment of society. Yet it was his sister, Norma, who garnered much more attention. Abram and Robert had taken care to plan Norma. They had conscientiously selected, shaped, and polished every part of her being. Her brother Norman, though equally shaped and polished, was an afterthought. In the eyes of her fathers, who had carefully selected data from over 15,000 women, Norma embodied the epitome of womanhood. Her body was described as having a harmony of proportions. Contests and pageants were announced in her honour. She was featured on the front page of newspapers. Her slim, unachievable physique ignited moral panic over diet, fitness, and health. Institutionalized since birth, Norman and Norma had little agency in the world except for the place they occupied in people's minds. From this position, however, Norman and Norma inspired the rollout of standardized tests, personality profiling, and generic performance indicators that irrevocably undermined education, stymied relationships, and harmed workplace culture. With Norman and Norma as its heralds, the pursuit of normality would become an obstacle to self-fulfillment and a barrier to social inclusion. Cast in creamy white alabaster, Norman and Norma stand in stark contrast to the mythical origins of living humans, who are said to have been formed from the dust of the ground, the mud of the earth, or the mixing of clay. While the first humans were shaped from coarse earthen materials, Norman and Norma's forms find their genesis in the refined essence of mineral deposits quarried from open pits. Alabaster, a fine-grained aggregate, graces them with a smooth, soft, milky white surface. Yielding easily to the sculptor's hand, alabaster can be carved into elaborate and precise shapes that hold and reflect light, but remain cool to the touch. Human bodies, however, need dedicated time and attention to exercise, diet, and beauty treatments to maintain a complexion and physique like Norman and Norma. Failing that, costly pharmaceutical interventions and plastic surgery are the remaining option. To comprehend the god of normality's earthly edification, one must return to a time when Norma and Norman were just a twinkling in the god's eye. Normality had not always been a divine being. For a long period of time, this god had toiled in the hands of architects, carpenters, and masons as the carpenter's norm. a tool for measuring right angles used in erecting everything from the Motte and Bailey castles of the Normans to the temples of the Freemasons. It wasn't until the 18th century when this precise measuring tool had been elevated to the heavens at the hand of French astronomer Nicolas Louis de Lacaille during his expedition to the Cape of Good Hope to chart the southern skies. Prior to Lacaille's work, the southern night skies had been home to the free-flowing mythical figures of ancient Greek and Egyptian mythology, including Orion, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Sagittarius, Capricornus, Pisces, Phoenix, Centaurus, and Lupus. Not to mention the antelope, tortoise, snake, river, and great hunter, seen by the herders and bushmen of the indigenous people of the Cape of Good Hope. Lacaille, however, projected a very different vision onto the night sky. Where people had once seen flowing, curvaceous, animal-like figures, Lacaille saw straight lines and sharp angles. The 14 constellations that he charted were all named after instruments of measurement. Next to the flowing lines of Sagittarius and Capricornus stood the geometrically precise shapes of microscopium and telescopium. Between Pisces and Phoenix was the straight-edged countenance of Apparatus Sculptoris. The undulating bends and curves of Centaurus and Lupus were juxtaposed by the resolute lines of Norma et Regula and the fixed form of the compass, Circinus. Lacaille's constellations exuded an air of scholarly exactitude and methodical craftsmanship that was nonetheless still surrounded by the whimsical grandeur of more time-honoured constellations. Each of Lacaille's hard-lined and sharp-angled instruments stood distinct against a celestial menagerie of more ancient creature-like constellations. The 14 edgy constellations told tales not of gods and heroes of ages past, but of the tools and instruments that shaped an emerging scientific world. They jarred sharply with a modern allure, an explosion of angles and lines that signalled a new era dawning. A mere few decades after Lacaille published his work, normal schools were erected in the heart of Europe and the burgeoning expanse of North America. Like the voracious tendrils of some ambitious vine, normal schools reached into the furthest outposts of the colonial world, from France to India, Argentina to Australia, and even further to China and Japan. Any god would have undoubtedly observed this spread with avarice and yearned to mark the incantations of literacy, numeracy, and geometry with their name. Lacaille played a crucial role in elevating the carpenter's norm to the heavens. This celestial blueprint significantly contributed to shaping the identity and manifestation of the god of normality on Earth. If Lacaille can be considered as Norma's celestial architect, and if Abram Belsky and Robert Latour Dickinson can be considered the artistic and scientific progenitors of Norman and Norma, then a fourth person, the 18th century astronomer Adolphe Quetelet, could be seen as an intriguing intermediary, a kind of intellectual doula guiding the descent of Norma from the stars to the pages of political manifestos and academic theses, and eventually to statistical textbooks and psychological profiling. Adolphe Quetelet, an astronomer turned statistician, aimed to make a name for himself in the stars, but his lasting contributions emerged in the fields of political arithmetic and the nascent discipline of statecraft, which we now call statistics. His formulation of the average man became a cornerstone for evaluating individuals against standardized norms. This statistical lens, a potent extension of the god of normality's influence, swiftly permeated various fields, from medical and social sciences to criminology, education, and law. Most people, both professionals and lay people, remain unaware of the significant mathematical leap Quetelet made when he applied the law of errors from astronomy, where it was used to measure the movement of single planetary objects with fixed size, mass, and motion paths, to populations of discrete individuals, each with unique developmental trajectories, social histories, and ecocultural niches. Various mathematical maneuvers are employed to force data to fit theory when dealing with the bell curve, rather than attempting to align theory with data. Nonetheless, the illusion of objectivity has proven remarkably successful, and the calculation of the average is now one of the most recognised, albeit flawed, statistical methods worldwide. The concept of normality swiftly infiltrated medical and social sciences. Emile Durkheim referenced the concept over 90 times in his 1895 work, The Rules of the Sociological Method, though he did express some confusion about whether normality was an inherent quality or one imposed from external perspectives. By the 1930s, anthropologists such as Ruth Benedict, Edward Sapir, and Gregory Bateson no longer debated the veracity of normal as a concept, but advocated for understanding it across cultures in relative terms. Normal had to be understood in context. Normal was not universally applicable, but rather a cultural and, as Bateson took care to point out, a distinctly human construct. While anthropologists endeavoured to understand normal in culturally relative terms, scholars in the biological, medical and psychological sciences became obsessed with defining what constituted normal and what did not in absolute terms. Lawmakers and psychiatrists jockeyed to deploy normality as a boundary marker defining who remained part of society and who was removed. Various scholars in the humanities and social sciences concerned themselves with documenting and analysing the structural violence of normality, but none of them have seriously entertained the notion that normal is not merely an abstract concept, but an ineffable God. Let me be unequivocal. This is not a metaphorical statement. I am being literal. The way normality operates through humans can be likened to a godly influence. I know it's not normal for me to make this proposition, but that is the enchantment of the God of normality. By pointing out their divinity, they would have me condemned as abnormal. So I do not make this statement lightly, and if you bear with me, I believe it has important implications for anthropological fieldwork. I've come to this unusual and outlandish conclusion after interviewing over 60 experts, reviewing the use and analysis of normal in over 600 non-fiction and fiction texts, and I've conducted an ethnography of online forums, blogs, social media, and specialised online communities, including people living with chronic illness, people who identify as neurodiverse, the LGBTIQ+ community, intersectional environmentalists, and even conspiracy theorists. While the boundaries of the research scope are fuzzy, the data saturation has been surprisingly quick, with heterodox or novel insights requiring a lot of patience and a keen eye or ear. Beyond just observing and documenting discussions about the topic of normality, I also actively contribute to these discussions, spurring them further. I've been able to develop an online community of interlocutors who have assisted me in sourcing content, threads, and forums of critique. An analysis of the content with the hashtag normal and related variants reveals surface diversity but a homogeneity of underlying cognitive schemas. The diverse range of content, including personal reflections, memes, media representations, social commentary, activism, educational materials, and fashion trends, collectively paints a picture where normal is not just a descriptor, but a pervasive and foundational aspect of societal discourse. From meticulous grooming routines to carefully curated lifestyles, the suite of behaviours, choices, and practices that are promoted sum together to form a collective repertoire of rituals that, when woven together, form an elaborate liturgy, the worship of normality. Like Evans Pritchard, observing that every discussion with the newer would always inevitably return to a discussion of cows, I find myself hard-pressed to find a community where the central idiom is not the idiom of normality. Normality, as depicted in fiction, in live discussions, and in online conversations, is almost invariably a given, an unspoken backdrop against which individual experiences and societal expectations are framed. Normality operates as a baseline, creating a reference point against which anomalies become salient and conspicuous. The very concept of normal, as seen in these discussions, serves as a dividing line, delineating what is considered within the norm and what falls outside it. At the same time, normal fades very quickly into the background because normal is the background. Interestingly, normal carries a nostalgic value. Amid discussions challenging or contesting normative ideas, there is an undertone urging a return to the perceived normalcy of the past. This nostalgic view of normal might be rooted in a desire for stability or a perception that there was a time when societal norms were more coherent or less contested. Here lies a clue about how normal has gained social traction. Normality, albeit falsely, offers a veneer of certainty, stability, and predictability. Google's Ngram viewer supports this hypothesis, showing spikes in the frequency of the word normal after the First and Second World Wars, when uncertainty was at its peak. Serendipitously, Lacaille's constellation Norma et Regula was renamed Nor in the 1920s, which brought it etymologically closer to North Men. Norma et Regula went from being a southern constellation to becoming, in metaphorical terms, our North Star. A critical observation is that even when normal is contested, the predominant aim is to establish a new normal rather than dismantling the concept altogether. The discourse surrounding normality, in this sense, is dynamic and adaptive. It acknowledges the evolving nature of societal norms but does not entertain the idea of a world without normal. People frequently voice their suspicion that normal is a myth. This skepticism often falls short of rejecting normality outright. Instead, it typically amounts to an attempt to shift the boundaries of behaviours deemed normal. In other words, individuals may seek to normalise what was previously considered abnormal by redefining the parameters of normality. Despite assertions that normal does not exist, these same individuals paradoxically continue to operate as though it does by adhering to its influence. People do not think of normality as a myth the same way that they think of Zeus as a myth, or Odin or Quetzalcoatl. Those myths can be dismissed as superstitious. Unlike dismissing Odin or Zeus, however, ignoring normality and all of its associated body and social rituals can result in severe social consequences. The god of normality, with their firm grip on societal perceptions, effectively discourages a more profound analysis of their mythical status. However, as anthropologists, isn't this our duty? Myths, as Edmund Leach observed, are commonly described by anthropologists as being a sanction for socially approved behaviour. However, Leach added another dimension, describing myths as a language in which to maintain social controversy. Leach also concluded that there can never be absolute conformity to the cultural norm. Indeed, the norm itself exists only as a stress of conflicting interests and divergent attitudes. Leach's dual characterization of myths illuminates the multifaceted nature of normality as a narrative that both sanctions and challenges, upholds social order, and generates controversy. The god of normality, when viewed through this mythic framework, emerges not as a fixed entity, but as a complex force entangled in the intricate dynamics of societal expectations and divergent perspectives. Yes, to some extent normality is a myth, but its pervasiveness and persistence are attributed to the fact that normality has become the language of the myth. Normality has become the language through which social controversies are articulated and contested. On the one hand, normality is a prescriptive force endorsing approved behaviours, and on the other, it is a dynamic language fostering social debate. The norm, as stressed by conflicting interests and divergent attitudes, perpetuates a constant tension within the myth. Individuals, knowingly or unknowingly, navigate this tension, striving to conform to the myth while simultaneously contesting its boundaries. So if normal is a god, what kind of god are they? Francis Galton, originator of eugenics, believed that if the Greeks had discovered the bell curve, they would have personified and deified it. Normal, like Janus, the two-faced Roman god, is a contronym, inviting and desirable in one context, yet dull, basic, and unappealing in another. The god of normality gives the appearance of being, well, normal. This deity does not exude an aura of divine grandeur, but instead appears as an ordinary being, blending seamlessly into the fabric of human existence. Normality does not exude the unattainable perfection of the gods of Olympus, but rather of mediocrities incarnate, seemingly made of humanity, yet perpetually and impossibly out of reach. While the ancient Greeks strove to embody the perfection exemplified by their gods, they knew they would fall short because they were only human. The god of normality, however, tricks their adherents into believing it is one of them. Drawing individuals into its influence is a deceptive strategy to subtly extract sustenance from the struggles and aspirations of those who seek to conform to normality's elusive standards. Through this cunning ruse, the god of normality is able to feast on human suffering and sacrifice during our grueling workout regimes at the gym, our consumer choices at the mall, our beauty routines in the bathroom, our presentational rituals at our home, our body modifications in the surgery, and, in a perverse form of Molochian ritual, even the strict dress codes, oppressive academic expectations, and embodied social interactions embedded in education systems profoundly shape the social orientations, behavioural dispositions, and decision-making of our children. Our everyday rituals and practices are entangled with the ontology of normal. Our daily ablutions, our self-presentation in public, our consumer choices and private habits are all inflected by our personal understandings and interpretations of normality. Framing normality as a god with its own ontology means treating normality not merely as a descriptive concept, but as an active, influential force with inherent properties and agency. By conceptualizing normality as a god, we imbue it with a certain sacredness and power, acknowledging its ability to shape our world and influence human behavior, decisions, and perceptions. The pervasive, almost omnipresent influence of normality on individual behaviour and societal structures beckons a sensitivity to the unseen in our anthropological methods. It demands that we recognise the agency and influence of unseen, non-human actors in shaping embodied experience, social realities, and collective behaviour. Like a deity, normality dictates what is considered acceptable and condemns what deviates from its prescribed path. Normality is not just a social construct, normality is a god reigning over the intricacies of social acceptance and rejection. While some may dismiss normality as a conceptual illusion, the paradoxical reality is that it governs social norms, dictates inclusion or exclusion, and exerts tremendous pressure on individuals to conform. Illusions can exert a very real influence on our corporeal and intercorporeal experiences. Normality is the energy vampire hovering over our shoulder, prompting us to see our blemishes and imperfections when we look in the mirror. Normality is the spectre telling us to pump more weights in the gym. Normality is the gremlin that tells a doctor that the laboratory results are normal when the patient is saying otherwise. It is the ventriloquist poltergeist hiding behind the politician saying, "Nothing to see here." In the phenomenological dimensions of anthropological fieldwork, I am setting a challenging task to leave space for documentation of the unseen, the unheard, and unstated. By asking fellow anthropologists to entertain the idea that normality is a deity, I am inviting you to engage in a more critical examination of its role in shaping individuals and their social contexts, opening avenues for deeper reflection and potential transformation of our ethnographic fieldwork. For our ethnographies of living, breathing, idiosyncratic and psychologically complex individuals, it can be difficult to document what is unseen. But keeping room for the possibility of intricate interplays between human and more than human forces in shaping our bodies, interactions and lived experiences will undoubtedly add rich layers of meaning and understanding to what we do.